On the vast plains of Texas, a lonely woman makes a choice that could change her life forever. When a wounded Comanche boy appears at her cabin, she risks everything to save him. What happens next will surprise you. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Martha lived alone on the edge of the Texas frontier, where the land stretched wide and empty, broken only by tall grass and distant hills. Since her husband's death, silence had become her closest companion. Each morning, she tended a small garden, repaired broken fences, and tried to ignore the loneliness that settled deep in her heart. The nearby town was days away by horse and visitors were rare. Still, she stayed, believing the land was the last memory she shared with her husband. And leaving it felt like losing him all over again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and red, Martha heard a faint sound near her fence. At first, she thought it was a wounded animal, but the noise was different, soft, almost human. Taking a lantern, she stepped outside, her heart pounding with fear. Near the broken fence lay a young boy, his dark hair matted with sweat, his legs soaked in blood. His clothes were unfamiliar, and his eyes held a mix of pain and terror. Martha froze. She had heard stories about Comanche warriors, tales of raids, stolen cattle, and vanished settlers. Fear urged her to step back and lock the door, but the boy was barely conscious. His breathing was shallow, and he looked no older than 12. Slowly, she knelt beside him, noticing an arrow wound in his leg. He whispered something in a language she didn't understand, then collapsed again. She knew helping him could bring serious danger. If his tribe found him at her cabin, they might believe she had harmed him, but leaving him to die felt even worse. After a moment of struggle, she dragged him gently into her barn, hiding him behind stacks of hay. Using her husband's old medical supplies, she cleaned the wound as best she could and removed the broken arrowhead. The boy cried out softly but never resisted. That night, Martha barely slept. Every sound outside made her jump. She kept imagining shadowy figures approaching the cabin, ready to attack. Still, she checked on the boy several times, giving him water and small pieces of bread. By morning, his fever had risen and his face burned with heat. She mixed herbs, made soup, and stayed by his side, whispering calming words even though he couldn't understand them. On the second day, the boy regained some strength. He tried to stand but collapsed again, his legs still weak. Through gestures, he pointed toward the east and said one word again and again, "Father." Martha understood enough to know he wanted to return home. She nodded, promising to help when he was strong enough. Yet inside, fear grew stronger. If his father came searching, what would happen to her? The plains felt unusually quiet that day. No birds sang, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Martha noticed distant smoke on the horizon, but convinced herself it was just another settler's fire. She fed the boy and changed his bandage. He watched her carefully, no longer afraid but curious. He touched her hand gently, a silent sign of trust. That evening, as darkness fell, Martha heard distant drumming. It was faint, carried by the wind, but steady and rhythmic. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She realized the boy's people were close. Panic filled her mind, but she didn't blame the child. She had chosen this path the moment she helped him. Now she could only wait and face whatever came next. On the third day, the boy was strong enough to walk slowly. Martha considered sending him away before anyone arrived, but his wounds still needed care. She helped him sit outside the barn, where he looked toward the horizon with longing. The air felt heavy, as if the land itself was waiting. Every instinct told her that dawn would change her life forever. As night approached, Martha packed some food and water, just in case she needed to flee. She thought of her husband, of the promises they once made about living peacefully on this land. Tears filled her eyes as she wondered if kindness had finally cost her everything. Yet, deep inside, she felt no regret. Saving one life, even at great risk, still felt right. The sky was barely light when Martha heard the distant thunder of hooves. At first, she thought it was a storm rolling across the plains, but the sound grew stronger and more organized. She stepped outside her cabin and felt the ground vibrate beneath her feet. In the pale morning mist, dark figures appeared on the horizon, moving fast and silent like shadows. Her heart raced as she realized the boy's people had come. There was no more time to hide or run. Within minutes, 50 Comanche warriors surrounded her small cabin, their horses forming a wide circle. Spears and bows glinted in the rising sunlight. Martha stood frozen near her door, her hands trembling but her mind strangely calm. Fear washed over her, yet she refused to retreat. The wounded boy slowly stepped forward from the barn, now able to stand tall, though still weak. His eyes searched the crowd until he spotted a powerful man riding at the front. The chief dismounted and walked toward his son, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders and examining his wound. He spoke rapidly in their native language, his voice filled with emotion. The boy pointed at Martha and said something that made the chief pause. For a long moment, silence hung in the air. The warriors tightened their grip on their weapons, watching every movement closely. Martha felt time slow. She expected anger, blame, or even punishment. Instead, the chief slowly turned toward her. His expression was serious but not hostile. He approached carefully, stopping a few steps away. In broken English, he spoke words she would never forget. "You saved my son. You give him life." His voice was deep and heavy, filled with both strength and gratitude. The chief raised his hand, signaling his warriors to lower their weapons. One by one, bows were lowered and the tension began to fade. The boy smiled faintly and walked back to his father, who embraced him tightly. Martha felt tears in her eyes, unable to believe what she was witnessing. The fear that had haunted her for 3 days slowly melted into relief. Several warriors stepped forward carrying gifts. They placed buffalo hides, silver ornaments, dried meat, and woven blankets at Martha's feet. The chief explained that these were symbols of honor and respect. He told her that in their culture, saving a life created a bond stronger than blood. From that day forward, she would be considered a friend of the Comanche. Martha could barely speak. She had expected death, not gratitude. Her hands shook as she accepted the gifts, her heart overwhelmed by the moment. The chief then warned her about dangers on the frontier: raiders, bandits, and harsh winters. He promised that his people would protect her land and that no Comanche would ever harm her or her home. As the sun rose higher, the warriors prepared to leave. The boy turned back one last time and waved at Martha, his eyes shining with respect and affection. She waved back, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and pride. In just 3 days, a wounded stranger had changed her entire world. When the last rider disappeared into the distance, the plains felt quiet again. But this time, the silence was different. It no longer felt empty or lonely. Martha stood outside her cabin, surrounded by the gifts and memories of what had happened. She realized that kindness had not made her weak, it had made her stronger than fear. That evening, Martha sat by her window, watching the sunset with a peaceful heart. The land still looked the same, but she felt different inside. She knew that stories would spread, and her life would never be exactly as it was before. Yet she felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that even in a harsh and dangerous world, compassion could still create miracles. From that day on, Martha was never truly alone again. The Comanche kept their promise, and travelers spoke of a woman on the plains who was protected by warriors. But Martha didn't think of herself as brave or special. She believed she had simply done what any human heart should do: help another in need, even when fear said not to.